Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Behind all those terminal commands and hacking tutorials you've probably seen, there lies one definitive tool that absolutely shattered our early illusions of Wi-Fi security. We're talking about Aircrack-ng. It didn't just, find a little bug, it literally forced a massive global shift to the modern wireless encryption standards we use today.
So, how exactly did a totally free, open-source program manage to decipher secure wireless traffic in just minutes, and without requiring the user to have an advanced math degree, right? Well, today we are completely demystifying that process. We're going to shift away from just blindly copying and pasting terminal commands and actually get to the bottom of the invisible network layer protocols that made this whole thing possible.
Picture this. You're watching a real-time terminal capture. Packets of data are just flying by, and then, boom, almost instantly, a supposedly secure 128-bit network key completely falls. Right there in plain text. It immediately proved that when it comes to networking, obscurity is absolutely not security. The sheer speed of this compromise, that's exactly what made Aircrack-ng so revolutionary, and honestly, totally terrifying for network admins back then.
Section 1. The Invisible Wireless Puzzle, Seeing the Unseen.
The 802.11 protocol is basically our battlefield here, and early on, security engineers had to come to terms with a pretty harsh reality. You see, wireless security is fundamentally structurally harder to pull off than wired security. Why? Because an attacker doesn't actually need physical access to your building anymore. Unlike a wired connection safely tucked inside your walls, wireless data literally bleeds right through those walls. It spills into public spaces, out onto the street, or into the apartment next door. At its core, it's really just plain text radio waves bouncing around until we figure out a way to lock them down.
Section 2. WEP, a flawed shield, the illusion of privacy.
So, to protect those radio waves, the industry created WEP, which stands for Wired Equivalent Privacy. And the name kind of says it all, right? It was intended to give wireless networks the exact same level of security as a physical Cat5 cable. That was the big promise. To do this, it used something called the RC4 stream cipher to encrypt the data before broadcasting it. But, well, here is the problem. It harbored this massive, fundamental structural weakness right in its core cryptography. It essentially turned what should have been a heavy-duty vault into a lockbox made of glass.
The crucial point here comes down to how WEP handled things called initialization vectors, or IVs. You can think of an IV as a starting variable for a cryptographic math problem. Now, WEP used these short 24-bit IVs, and because that pool of variables was so incredibly small, a busy router would just run out of fresh ones. And what did it do? It just started reusing them, constantly recycling them. This meant the router was broadcasting the exact same flawed cryptographic puzzle pieces over and over and over again, right out in plain text for literally anyone nearby to scoop up.
Section 3. Listening versus talking, a paradigm shift.
This is where we see a really stark contrast in the hacking methodology of the time. The old way was passive sniffing, using a tool like AeroDump-ng. It was basically just quietly listening to the airwaves. An attacker would put their wireless card into monitor mode and then literally just sit there for hours, just hoping the router would naturally generate enough traffic to capture those reused IVs. But the real paradigm shift, that was active packet injection using AirPlay-ng. Instead of just waiting around, the attacker actively and aggressively talks to the router to immensely speed up the whole data collection process.
And honestly, this technique was entirely born out of sheer impatience. Security researchers realized that waiting for natural network traffic just took way too long, so they engineered a specific packet injection loop. The genius part is that you don't actually hack the router directly. Instead, you trick the router into talking to itself. By injecting specific packets into the air, you force the router to reply, and suddenly it's generating thousands of cryptographic keys every single second. You're essentially stressing the system until it panics and rapidly leaks its own secret puzzle pieces right into your waiting hands.
Section 4. Breaking the math, statistical cryptanalysis.
Okay, so this might actually be the most surprising fact of the entire explainer. The math behind cracking this early Wi-Fi was so incredibly efficient that breaking a 128-bit key required less computing power than it takes to load a modern web page today. Crazy, right? Because of how WEP kept reusing those short IVs we talked about, the encryption wasn't being defeated by brute force. Brute forcing that would take supercomputers years and years. No,
It was being cracked by completely exposing the structural logic of the cipher itself.
What Aircrack-ng did was utilize statistical cryptanalysis to exploit what we call IV collisions. Basically, when the router is forced to reuse that short IV, the software captures those colliding data packets, correlates them, and turns those repeated vectors into a totally solved equation. Once enough packets are gathered, it reveals the password in mere seconds. It's pure math. And this exact mathematical loophole is precisely why modern standards had to drastically increase the IV size and completely change the cipher. They had to ensure this could literally never happen again.
Section 5. The Global Security Shift, from Auditing to Evolution.
This rapid cascade of events really shows you how incredibly quickly the WEP standard collapsed. I mean, think about it. In 1999, WEP was the absolute gold standard for wireless. Then by 2001, researchers Fleur, Manton, and Shamir released a paper exposing the mathematical flaws in the RC4 cipher. But, academic papers are mostly just theory. It wasn't until 2004 when those theoretical flaws were fully weaponized and packaged into the highly accessible unified Aircrack-ng suite that the whole world collectively realized WEP was functionally dead. You couldn't just patch it. The foundational standard had to be completely, utterly abandoned.
The ultimate takeaway here: obscurity is not security. You simply cannot rely on closed systems or secret proprietary algorithms to keep your data safe. Hiding a poorly designed protocol from the public doesn't magically protect it from mathematics. The math will always find the structural flaw. And once it does, any illusion of security you had is completely shattered.
I'm going to leave you with this final kind of provocative thought to chew on. When Aircrack-ng was released, it gave literally anyone with a laptop the power to break into Wi-Fi networks. And yeah, that definitely caused a lot of chaos. But without that clear, undeniable threat, would the massive tech giants have actually moved so quickly to develop the much stronger modern wireless standards that we all rely on today? By exposing the flaws so aggressively, did Aircrack-ng actually save the system? It is definitely something to think about the next time you connect to a wireless network.